You are looking at a field of wheat, rows of it, golden, stretching to the horizon, planted by human hands. It feels like the beginning of everything good. It feels like the moment your species finally won. Now imagine it never happened. No wheat, no fields, no villages, no cities rising out of the mud. For roughly 300,000 years, that was not a thought experiment. That was simply the world. Every human who ever lived was born into it, hunted in it, slept under it, and died in it. And not one of them planted a single seed on purpose. Then, around 12,000 years ago, in a handful of places at once, a few people started scattering grain and waiting. And that small act rewired the entire human story. We call it the agricultural revolution, and we treat it as the hero of the tale. The moment you stopped being an animal and started building the world. But what if it had never come? What if your ancestors had looked at that first patch of tended grain and simply walked away? To answer that, you first have to understand something uncomfortable. Farming may not have been the upgrade you were taught it was. Let's go back, before the fields, before the fences, before the grain. Picture a small band of people, maybe 20 or 30, moving across an open landscape. This is the world of the hunter-gatherer, the way humans lived for over 95% of our time on this planet. There is no boss. There is no rent. There is no calendar telling you where to be. Your food is not stored in a barn. It is walking around, growing on branches, buried in the soil, waiting to be found. For a long time, we assumed this life was miserable, nasty, brutish, and short. A desperate scramble against starvation. Then an anthropologist named Richard Lee went to the Kalahari Desert in the early 1960s to actually measure it. Lee lived with the Jew/Hoansi, a group of hunter-gatherers in southern Africa. He didn't guess. He weighed their food, he timed their work, and what he found stunned the field of anthropology. These people, living in one of the harshest environments on Earth, spent only about 15 to 20 hours a week getting food. That's it. 2, maybe 3 hours a day. The rest of their time went to rest, to visiting, to storytelling, to making music, to simply being with each other. Sit with that number for a second. How many hours a week do you work? The anthropologist Marshall Sahlins gave this idea a name that made people furious. He called hunter-gatherers the original Affluent Society. Not affluent because they had a lot. Affluent because they wanted little. And what they wanted, they could get easily. Their wealth was time. And they had more of it than you do. Now, this picture isn't a fairy tale. Life in that world was genuinely dangerous. Childhood was fragile. Injuries could kill, and predators were real. But here's the part that changes everything. Once a hunter-gatherer survived childhood, they often lived into their 60s and beyond. The diet was varied, wild, and rich. Dozens of plant species, lean meat. No single crop to fail and doom them all. So why would anyone give this up? Why would you trade freedom and free time for a life bent over in a field? That is the great mystery at the center of your own origin story. And the answer is not what you'd expect. Because the evidence suggests that when humans took up farming, their lives got worse. Measurably, physically, provably worse. Let's look at the bones. Bones don't lie. A skeleton is a record of a life. It remembers your childhood hunger, your broken joints, your worn-down teeth, the diseases you fought. And when archaeologists dug up the skeletons of the first farmers and compared them to the hunter-gatherers who came before, they saw a disaster written in the bone. The first farmers were shorter. Studies of skeletal remains across the ancient world, including work compiled by the researcher Amanda Mummert, show that human height dropped sharply after the switch to agriculture. In some regions, people lost several inches compared to their foraging ancestors. Their bodies were literally shrinking. Their teeth rotted. Hunter-gatherers had remarkably good teeth. Then farming brought a diet flooded with soft, starchy grain, and cavities exploded. For the first time in history, human mouths were full of holes. Their bones showed the marks of famine. Lines called enamel hypoplasia, ridges in the teeth that form when a child starves during growth, became far more common. Farmers were starving as children in a way foragers rarely did, and they got sick. New diseases. Diseases we still fear today. Why? Because farming did 3 catastrophic things at once. It packed people together in dense, permanent settlements. It kept them living right next to their own waste and their animals. And it gave viruses a crowd to jump through. Measles, smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis. Many of the plagues that would go on to shape human history came from animals we domesticated and the crowded villages we built to farm them. You didn't just plant wheat. You planted the conditions for pandemics. So imagine again that none of this happened. No dense villages. No stored grain drawing in rats. No cattle breathing new viruses into human lungs. In a world without agriculture, some of history's deadliest diseases might never have found the foothold they needed to exist at all. This is why the scientist Jared Diamond, in a famous essay called The Invention of Agriculture, the worst mistake in the history of the human race. A deliberately provocative line. But look at the bones, and it stops sounding like an exaggeration. So we have to ask the question honestly. If farming made people shorter, sicker, and more overworked, why on earth did it win? Here's where the story turns and where it gets truly strange. Because agriculture was not a choice someone made one bright morning. It was a trap that closed slowly, one small, sensible decision at a time. Let's reconstruct how it actually happened. Go to a place like Abu Huraira, an ancient settlement on the Euphrates River, studied in detail by the archaeologist Andrew Moore. The people there were not farmers, not at first. They were foragers who found a spot so rich in wild grain that they didn't need to move. So they stayed, they built round houses, they settled down. And that was the first step into the trap. Because once you stop moving, everything changes. A hunter-gatherer on the move can only carry one small child at a time. Their children are naturally spaced years apart. But a settled people, with soft grain to feed infants and no need to walk, can have babies faster. More mouths, more children surviving. The population grows. And a bigger population needs more food, so you gather more wild grain. Then you start protecting the patches you like. Then you start clearing weeds around them. Then you start saving the best seeds to scatter next season. Not one of these is a decision to invent farming. Each one is just a small, reasonable step to feed the children you already have. But now you're committed. Now the fields need tending. Now you can't just walk away because your whole growing tribe depends on this harvest. The wheat, in a strange way, has domesticated you. You think you tamed the plant. But the plant rearranged your entire life, your body, your schedule, and your future. This is the twist your history books left out. Agriculture didn't free humanity. It captured it. It fed more people, yes, far more. But it fed them worse, worked them harder, and chained them to a patch of ground they could never leave. So picture the world where that trap never closes, where your ancestors at Abu Huraira and 100 places like it stay foragers. What would your world look like? There would be no cities. Cities need stored, taxable surplus grain to feed people who don't grow their own food. And without farming, there is no surplus. So no kings either. The first kings rose by controlling granaries. No stored food, no throne. There would be far fewer of us. Agriculture is the engine behind the human population explosion. Foraging can feed maybe one person per 10 square kilometers. Farming can feed 100 times that. Without it, humanity might have stayed a scattered species of a few million, spread thin across the whole planet, never billions, never crowded. There would likely be no writing as you know it, because the earliest writing we found wasn't poetry or prayer. It was accounting, lists of grain, records of who owed what. Take away the granary, and you take away the ledger, and perhaps the very reason to invent letters at all. And here's the harder truth. There would probably be no you reading this on a glowing screen in a heated room, having never once worried about being eaten. The chain of surplus and cities and specialists and science that built your entire world runs straight back through that field of wheat. Pull out agriculture and the whole structure of modern life never rises. So was it a mistake, or was it the foundation of everything? The strange answer is that it was both. For the individual human standing in that first field, agriculture was a step down. Less freedom, worse health, harder days. But for the species, it was a runaway engine. It turned a few million foragers into 8 billion people who reshaped the planet. The cost was borne by the bodies of those early farmers. The reward was collected by the civilization they never lived to see. And that trade, that exact trade, is still running inside your own life right now. Think about it. You live in the most materially abundant moment in all of human history. You have more food, more comfort, more safety than any hunter-gatherer could dream of. And yet, The anthropologist James Sussman, who spent decades living among and studying the hoansi, points to something unsettling. Those foragers, with almost no possessions, worked a fraction of the hours you do, and reported feeling secure, unhurried, and content. You have everything they lacked. So why do so many people today feel the exact opposite? Overworked, rushed, anxious about a future that never arrives. Because you are living inside the same bargain your ancestors struck in that field. You traded time for stuff. You traded ease for growth. You said yes to more and more, asked for your hours in return. Every notification, every deadline, every schedule that tells you where to be is the distant echo of the moment a free-moving forager first knelt down to guard a patch of grain, and quietly became its servant. The wheat is still domesticating us, it just wears different clothes now. So what do you do with that? You cannot uninvent agriculture. You would not want to. The world it built is the world that holds your life. But you can see the trade clearly, maybe for the first time. You can notice in your own days where you are choosing more when you already have enough. You can remember that your deep ancestors measured wealth not in what they stored, but in the time they were free to spend. You are looking at a field of wheat, rows of it, golden, planted by human hands. But now you know what it really is. Not just the beginning of everything you have. It is also the moment your species made a bargain it is still paying for. The day you traded a wild, unhurried freedom for the crowded, brilliant, exhausting world you were born into. And the strangest part of all is that, given the chance to choose again, knowing everything the bones and the deserts and the ledgers can teach you, you still might not walk away.